For 75 years, Southwest Power Pool has helped our members work together to keep the lights on. Our mission is to ensure the reliable supply of power, adequate transmission infrastructure, and competitive wholesale electricity prices in our region. SPP today is a regional transmission organization representing nearly 100 member companies. Our diverse membership spans 14 states, and our footprint covers a 575,000 square mile region with over 60,000 miles of transmission lines.
SPP is primarily a relationship-based organization, and we have been for 75 years. The things that we've accomplished over the years and the things yet to be accomplished will be primarily based on the strength of the relationships between our members and between our members and our staff.
Although SPP has grown dramatically over 75 years, the core of who we are remains the same as when we started in 1941. But in order to understand the history of SPP, you first need to understand how electrical power was managed before World War II.
In 1935, 90% of all American farms without light or power. The cities are lighted, the country still in the dark. 1936, 7,500 farm families get light. 1939, 435,000 families and other users, 600 systems operating in early 1940. Well over 500,000 farms, schools, churches, stores, and rural industrial plants getting electric service for the first time.
Utility companies at that time were unsure of how to operate together across state lines. The grid was made up of independent population centers that had their own power plants. World War II changed that.
I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
When Congress declared war on Japan and Germany, industrial production and manufacturing ramped up across the United States. This increased the need for electricity beyond the capacity of the infrastructure of the time. In response to this need, 11 companies in and around Arkansas signed an intercompany agreement on December 16, 1941, forming the Southwest Power Pool and agreeing to work across state lines to ensure reliability for the region. SPP was originally founded to ensure electric reliability for the Jones Mill plant near Malvern, Arkansas. The aluminum from the mill was crucial to the U.S. war efforts.
The richest of these commercial-grade aluminum deposits are located in the central region of Arkansas. Although traces of aluminum may be found in almost any soil, only those clays containing 50 or 60% aluminum ore and known as bauxite are mined for commercial production.
Even in its early days, SPP benefited from developing and utilizing a regional transmission system. During the war, electric demand grew 73% nationwide, and SPP had to ensure that its regional grid could accommodate that kind of growth. Ultimately, SPP was successful and was able to keep power flowing to Jones Mill.
Reporters rush out to relay the news to an anxious world and touch off celebrations throughout the country. Washington is jubilant, and in Chicago, more than 1 million sing and dance in the streets in the biggest celebration the Windy City has ever seen. Joy is unconfined.
When World War II ended in 1945, SPP continued their interconnected operation to the benefit of post-war America.
After the war, a lot of people had moved into the cities to work in the industries, and electricity was an expectation there. It was no longer considered a luxury, but really part of everyday life.
There were new electrical appliances that people were starting to put in their homes. That created excess demand with SPP and its members had to meet. People were installing window air conditioning units. In fact, TV sales rose 83% in 1958.
This rapid electrification of post-war America would prove to be a powder keg of sorts. Power companies tried their best to meet continuously rising demand and ease load. But on November 9, 1965, a massive blackout in the Northeast put 30 million people in the dark for 13 hours.
Look at the 65 blackout that occurred back in New York. we watched it on the frequency. And we looked at our telemetry and we said, well, it's way back east someplace.
So when the blackout happened in the Northeast, it impacted everybody. Now, we weren't physically impacted, but ultimately the industry was impacted.
After the blackout, SPP became one of the founding members of the new National Electric Reliability Council, or NERC. NERC's responsibility was to help ensure reliability throughout the U.S. and large parts of Canada, and to guard against similar incidents in the future.
So the 1970s was really a challenging time for the electric industry as well as for Southwest Power Pool. A lot of changes were going on federally, nationally. Congress was very active with issues that impacted the electricity industry throughout the 70s. You know, we had the Endangered Species Act of 1973, then in 1978 we had the National Energy Policy Act, and both of those really changed how the industry could build and utilize resources. But you know, we got through those challenging times because of the collaborative effort that we have at Southwest Power Pool with our member companies. They worked together. They came up with solutions and faced some increasingly complex and challenging times head on, and were able to work through it and be successful.
One such example, in 1975, SPP purchased its first computer, the Prime 550, to run its studies and power flow models. The Prime 550 is just one example of SPP embracing emerging technology to provide value to our members.
The computer had 2 quarter meg memory boards, and each memory board was about the size of a pizza box. And it's amazing for me to realize how far SPP has come in those 31 years since 1985. My personal cell phone has more computing power than the entire computer that SPP that ran our network and performed engineering studies.
Before we got the Prime 550, we had to run our studies and power flows by hand. We would put data on IBM punch cards and take it to Dallas for the analysis and runs. Getting the Prime 550 greatly simplified that process and improved our ability to run power flow studies.
So back in the 80s and 90s, we updated our IT infrastructure and implemented our first telecommunications network. Wasn't long after that we implemented our first reserve sharing system.
By the 90s, SPP and its members had been conducting interstate commerce and writing the rules of the road for electrical interconnection and more for almost 50 years.
SPP was operating primarily as an entrepreneurially based organization. In fact, quite interestingly, we existed as an organization for 53 years before we incorporated. In other words, we didn't legally exist for 53 years. And the way that we accomplished what we accomplished was through the relationships primarily between our members, because our staff was relatively very small.
In 1992, SPP held a retreat to develop a strategic plan for the future of the organization. It was there that SPP first put down on paper its mission statement, helping our members work together to keep the lights on today and in the future. Shortly thereafter, SPP implemented its first regional tariff, codifying the rates, terms, and conditions under which power would be sold in its footprint. The board approved the open access transmission tariff in 1997, and it was implemented in 1998.
There was originally concern of SPP members that a regional tariff would reduce revenues, but actually the tariff on a region-wide increased revenues.
In 1999, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission issued Order 2000, which established Regional Transmission Organizations, or RTOs. During the previous decade, SPP worked to define how participants in the electricity market would interact with transmission providers. SPP also created its first 24/7 Security Coordination Center. SPP pursued RTO designation, and it was approved in 2004.
When we became an RTO, that really kind of precipitated a lot of growth in us as an organization. The RTO was a regional transmission organization that was promulgated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, sort of a rule making back in late 99, early 2000. It kind of increased the scope of what we did as an organization and the services that we were required to provide as an organization. That precipitated the growth of SPP and the services that we began to offer to our membership, and ultimately led to where we are today.
FERC required that RTOs be freed from undue influence. To ensure its independence, SPP's board of directors underwent an evolution between 2000 and 2004. The board was a hybrid of stakeholders and independently elected members, and then transformed into a fully independent board and a separate members committee.
In 2004, as we transitioned to a regional transmission organization, a decision was made to transition our board to a complete non-stakeholder board of directors. Our 21-person hybrid board then dissected itself. The 7 independent directors became the board, and the 14 stakeholder directors became a members committee that would sit with the board in all meetings, engage in the debate, and then vote on the issue in an advisory manner, so that the board of directors understood where each and every one of the members committee reps were on the issue prior to the board then taking their vote.
Also that year, SPP incorporated the Regional State Committee, or RSC, which is made up of state-level regulators within SPP's footprint.
SPP is the first RTO to give authority to regional state committees, while other RTOs, the positions are merely advisory.
As I looked at the theme for the 75th anniversary, I thought that it was very appropriate that they would choose reliability through relationships, because my experience with the RSC has been that our voice, the voice of the states, is really valued.
Relationships matter at SPP. It's all about the stakeholders' voices. And that's why there are so many work groups and task forces to make sure all our stakeholders in our entire region have a voice for policy and governance.
Amidst this rapid growth and change, SPP experienced growing pains related to staff and responsibilities. To address this, the company began an initiative to document and define what was expected of every SPP employee and what every stakeholder could expect from the organization. As part of this effort, SPP defined its core ideology: do the right thing, for the right reason, in the right way, and 3 culture drivers that feed SPP's corporate culture: efficiency, collaboration, and continuous improvement.
Early in my presidency of the corporation, it became very apparent to me that the culture of an organization, regardless of what it is really what determines the success. And my earlier thinking was that culture ate strategy for lunch every day, and the more I thought about it, you don't even get to lunch. The culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. And then since that time, it's transitioned to culture being the ultimate strategy. It's not one versus the other, but regardless of how good your strategy is, if it's not aligned and based on the well-documented and well-enforced culture of the organization, that you're not going to be successful.
As SPP grew, it had to find new accommodations. In 1941, it first housed consulting staff in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Technical staff moved to Little Rock in 1942. SPP remained in Little Rock, leasing space at various locations. In 2007, it opened its 20,000 square foot operations center in Maumelle, Arkansas, to accommodate new staff and technology. For the first time, SPP owned a building that was not shared with other tenants. In 2007, SPP was designated a NERC regional entity with the authority to audit, investigate, and ensure that owners and operators of the bulk power systems complied with mandatory reliability standards.
SPP became one of the first, and today is the only entity that is both a regional entity and a regional transmission organization.
From 2005 to 2010, SPP undertook several vital initiatives to meet transmission planning needs: the SPP Transmission Expansion Plan, the Balanced Portfolio, the Synergistic Planning Project, Priority Projects, the near-term 10-year and 20-year Integrated Transmission Planning Processes, and the innovative Highway-Byway Cost Allocation Plan.
Transmission expansion planning is one of our core functions, and it provides tremendous value. For example, we recently found that transmission investment in our region made as a result of our planning efforts provides a benefit to cost ratio of 3.5 to 1. That means for every dollar that our members invest in improving the transmission system, on average, our ratepayers can expect to receive $3.5 of benefits.
By the end of the first decade of this new century, SPP had evolved in size and scope far beyond the capacity of its existing office space. In 2012, SPP held the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new 20-acre, state-of-the-art campus built in Little Rock, Arkansas. The campus consisted of a new data and operations center, a 4-story corporate center, and a parking deck. The integrity and efficacy of SPP's culture and business model were affirmed in 2014 when the company was named by Arkansas Business as the best place to work in Arkansas.
I tend to think of SPP broader than just the company, but if you think just about SPP, it was always how friendly and accommodating and easy to work with the people were.
This is probably the most professional organization I've worked with in the 24 years of public service I've done.
On March 1st, 2014, SPP went live with its most ambitious project to date, the Integrated Marketplace, which built upon SPP's previous markets.
The Integrated Marketplace allows SPP customers to take advantage of the diverse energy resources. The Integrated Marketplace has provided approximately $1 billion in net savings to the SPP region and its customers.
In 2009, SPP's region had grown significantly with the addition of several Nebraska utilities to its membership roster. In 2015, the SPP footprint would nearly double again when the integrated systems joined SPP's RTO.
The addition of Western Area Power Administration, Basin Electric, and Heartland Consumer Power District brought about 5,000 megawatts of peak demand and 9,500 miles of transmission infrastructure into the SPP region.
The decisions that the utilities in Nebraska and the Dakotas have made have just put an emphasis point on what makes SPP different. In terms of markets, in terms of reliability, they could have become members of different organization and gotten almost the same thing. The reason they made the decision to become part of SPP was the way the governance structure works and the culture of the organization, which is all about how you can serve better.
Today, SPP serves a population of nearly 18 million people in a region that stretches from the Canadian border in the north to Louisiana in the south and as far west as New Mexico and Montana. SPP provides tremendous value to that region. SPP members receive net benefits of more than $1.4 billion annually at a benefit-to-cost ratio of more than 10 to 1. And SPP provides a service that is critical to our nation.
You know, it has to do with it philosophically recognizing the gift of electricity. It is something so important, particularly today. All that we did and do or have done and are doing and will do with that in mind, helping lift people up. What we're doing is important. It's important to our, not just to our families and all, but it's important to everybody. We're doing it together. We are interdependent.
In 2016, SPP is still making history. In the first quarter of 2016 alone, the organization lowered its reserve margin, completed its first competitively bid transmission owner selection process, and expanded its board. What does the future hold for SPP? New technologies and regulations will pose challenges and opportunities our experts cannot yet predict. But after 75 years, one thing is certain. The relationships SPP has forged with its members and stakeholders will always position the company to adapt, reach consensus, and move forward.
We think of ourselves as providing electricity, and I think that we're going to have to change that view in the future. What OG&E with the SPP provides is reliability.
Since 11 companies joined together in 1941, our relationships have seen SPP through a multitude of changes. Those relationships will carry SPP forward together for another 75 years. We are Southwest Power Pool, helping our members work together to keep the lights on today and in the future.